Good morning. My name is Kimberly Meck, and I'm the Executive Director of Disability Empowerment Center. My visual description is a white female. Sorry, I apologize. The captioner has my name incorrect. It's Kimberly Meck. There you go. And we are going to be hosting our Understanding Ableism webinar for March. I'm going to go over a little bit of, oh, I apologize. Sorry, I forgot to do my visual description as I got sidetracked. I'm a white female with sunglasses on my head. My hair is pulled back. And I have a blue hoodie on. I'm going to go over a little bit of accessibility things for our presentation today in order to make sure that everybody is able to actively participate. So captions are available in Zoom. Click show subtitle in your Zoom menu bar to turn them on. Captions are also available in Caption Viewer. That URL is too long to read, so I'll paste it in the chat. ASL interpreters are available today, and we're presenting in gallery view, so the interpreters should always be visible. You don't need to pin them. Please know that we have 2 interpreters, so if you pin the current interpreter, it could prevent you from seeing the active interpreter after an interpreter change. You do not need to be on Zoom to access this event. We will read all questions out loud and voice any images on screen so that content will be available to individuals calling in on the phone or who cannot see visual content. This event is being recorded, and we will answer questions periodically throughout the discussion. Please use the Q&A tab for questions you have for the panelists, and please use the chat tab for general conversation and comments. We will use both person with a disability and disabled person interchangeably, recognizing different people's preferences for person first and identity first language. Without further ado, I will share our PowerPoint. And then I will let Colin take over. It's all yours, Colin.
All righty. So let me orient everyone to this event. Actually, I just realized I forgot my name, pronouns, and visual description. My name is Colin Wilfred. My pronouns are he, they. My visual description is I'm a white dude with dark brown hair and a dark blue shirt, dark blue polo with blue stripes. And I have some posters about a poster with a definition of ableism in the back, and a poster that says attitude with some that takes place at night with, I think, morning-ish actually, and with trees. Anyway, let's move on.
Sorry, I apologize. The interpreter is not visible, and I need to make sure that we've got that.
Should I do my name, pronouns, and visual description again?
No, I need you to just wait for just a moment. I need to. One second. You know, Colin, unfortunately, I think that with as many people being spotlighted, oh wait, hang on. I think this is only the second one we've done. Zoom has changed since we've done this for a while, so let's see if this works. Okay. Is the ASL interpreter visible for you?
All right.
Oh, hang on. Wait. I'd like to see if the ASL interpreter is visible for the individual who...
Someone said yes. Someone commented yes.
awesome, because I don't have the chat pulled up. So thank you. Thank you for letting us know.
All right. So
Colin, you'd finished your visual description.
All right, so let me orient everyone to this event now. So this is the second session of the 2025 season for our Understanding Ableism monthly series. These events are hosted by the King County Disability Consortium, which is composed of over 40 disability-serving organizations and individual disability advocates and activists. These Understanding Ableism events are led by the disability community, promoting disability justice within the King County enterprise. In the second episode of the Understanding Ableism Series 2025 season, we will be discussing disability accessibility in the legal system. There is a reason why the legal system exists. Sometimes there will be conflict between two sides of an argument, with neither side willing to concede. Clients depend on attorneys to use the law to defend their case, and plaintiffs and defendants depend on judges to understand the arguments of both sides and make a ruling based on what they think is fair. Unfortunately for the disability community, there are countless instances of the legal system treating them in ableist ways. For instance, sometimes there is no ASL interpreter or closed captioning provided to people who need them for hearings. The goal of this webinar is for people with disabilities who have experienced the legal system to talk about their experiences and use them to suggest ways in which attorneys and judges can understand that people with disabilities need accommodations. Otherwise, they won't be able to tell their side of the story so that the courtroom can have empathy. Whether they take their own cases to court, they wind up in court without intending to be there, or if an attorney has a disability, the disability community hopes that lawyers and judges will make sure that anyone involved in any of their cases will have accommodations for their hearing as needed. The document that contains all the questions that will be asked on today's panel is in the chat. Now, I will ask each panelist to introduce themselves with their names, pronouns, a visual description, where they live, and what their connection is to this topic. We're going to start with Olivia Ortiz.
Thank you so much, Colin, and thank you so much to Marielle and to Kimberly for having us here today. My name is Olivia Ortiz. I use she, her pronouns. My visual description is that I am a Latina woman. I have light brown skin with dark hair. I am wearing a dark navy jacket with a light purple shirt, and in my background there is a window overlooking the city as well as a wooden chair. I am a staff attorney at Northwest Justice Project in King County, Washington, and I live in Seattle. I serve low-income people experiencing domestic violence, which there is a lot of intersection with the disability community. Thank you.
Next up, we have Elicia Tomason.
Where'd my notes go? Sorry. My notes were on the other screen. I didn't realize I was having an introduction right now, so. Hi, my name is Elicia Tomason. I am sitting on a couch and I'm wearing a shirt that says meow. And the M and the W have cat faces on them. And it's black. And I have long hair. And I'm female and I'm 35. Do I need to do anything else?
Next up, we have Adrienne Stuart.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for hosting this important event today. This is a really critical conversation that I'm so grateful to be a part of. I actually live in Northeast Tacoma, but I work in King County. I'm an assistant attorney general in the Social and Health Services Division here in Seattle. I have on a black shirt and some black glasses, and I have kind of long, wavy, brownish, blondish hair. Previously, I come to this work with about 8 years of experience professionally as a disability policy fellow of sorts, serving in various positions. But mostly focused on developmental disabilities, which are typically you're born with and are expected to last a lifetime. I come to this work with both invisible disabilities myself, but also having 2 kids born with developmental disabilities who are unable to access a lot of the systems that many of us take for granted. So I'm so happy to be here. Thank you again for hosting, and I look forward to the conversation.
And last but not least, we have Alex Strout.
Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Strout. I am a paralegal at Benefits Law Center here in Seattle. He, him pronouns are what I use, and I have long hair that's tied back. I am a white man and wearing a brown button-down shirt and a orange sweater today. So I have worked here at Benefits Law Center for over 5 years now. And what we do here is help people who with Social Security issues, mostly disability benefits. And so we work with folks in King County who need legal help with a Social Security problem. So that's what's brought me to this work.
All right, everybody. So now I'm going to ask each of you the questions, and we're going to have 12 minutes maximum on each question, and each of you are going to have 3 minutes to answer each question. So let's begin. Starting in the same order we introduced them ourselves. The first question is, if you are part of the disability community, how does ableism impact your life?
Thanks, Colin. I am autistic. Autism is a developmental disability that impacts social communication, involves restrictive and repetitive behaviors, commonly identified with intense interests. I'm proud to be part of the autistic community and an attorney. And ableism impacts my life every day because my disability impacts my communication style. So I often engage in a process called masking to ensure that my tone, my communication style fits with what is expected from me from institutions like the court, my doctor's office, even just buying things at the grocery store. So
Olivia, is there any chance you can turn your volume up?
Sure, I can speak louder.
People are asking it in the chat.
Yeah, I can speak louder if this works. So as I mentioned, I am autistic, and that impacts my social communication style, and it's a developmental disability that will last for my entire life, and has lasted for my entire life. And great to hear the feedback that my volume is better. Thank you. And so we communicate everywhere we go. And so I have to adjust my communication style when I'm doing presentations like this. when I'm interacting with institutions like the court, going to my doctor's appointments, interacting with my employer, even going to the grocery store. And I engage in a process called masking to make my communication more accessible and understandable to neurotypical people. However, in the autism community, not all of us can engage in this masking process. Not all of us want to, or are willing to, or are able to. And so it's really important that we have tools and access built into our systems to accommodate folks with the highest support needs. Thank you.
Hello. So this is Elicia Thomas again. I have dysautonomia, which is best described as a blood flow disorder. I don't really get, my blood is a finite resource, so sometimes I can't think for the day or I can't stand, and I never know until that day. And so that makes it really hard to plan and do anything. And I also have complex PTSD. I'm neurodivergent. I have ADHD and I'm on the spectrum. And so I'm not great at managing time either. So, yeah, basically I need more time to do things in general. And sometimes I just can't do them at all.
I think this is a great question. I do want to start with a definition of ableism that really speaks to me, that will lay the foundation for the rest of my answers. This definition comes from T.L. Lewis, who's a Black attorney and educator and disability justice advocate here in the Seattle area, and has been a real force of nature and somebody that I have really learned a lot from. They describe ableism as a system of assigning value to people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of normalcy, productivity, desirability, intelligence, excellence, and fitness. Constructed ideas that are deeply rooted in eugenics, anti-Blackness, misogyny, colonialism, imperialism, and capitalism. Systemic oppression that leads to people in society determining people's value based on their culture, age, language, appearance, religion, birth, or living place, health and wellness, and or their ability to satisfactorily reproduce, excel, and behave. You do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. So that's, I think, is just a really important foundation, at least for me, to understand where I'm coming from. To answer the question, the second part of the question, how do I struggle with it? As a kid, I always struggled with standardized tests. I was a very poor student because, like others have stated, I really needed to be very connected to the material that was being taught, or else I just didn't care. I just disengaged. I needed to be intensely interested in the material before I would sit down and do the work. So when others were able to force themselves to sit through material that didn't seem to speak to them, I just wasn't able to do it. Today, I think I would be labeled with school refusal. But back then I was just allowed to pass with poor grades. I think that ableism impacts me because I do think we are in very nascent stages of understanding what ableism is, how pervasive it is, the intersections that are out there, especially with the criminalization of disability in general. And honestly, I'm mostly focused on how it impacts my child. You know, when we look at the outcomes for kids, kids with disabilities are 3 times more likely to be placed in foster care than kids without disabilities. Kids with disabilities are 4 times more likely to live in poverty than kids without disabilities, and they're 50% more likely to drop out of school than children with disabilities. So I'm really passionate and interested in focusing on trying to get to the upstream impacts for kids with disabilities, especially. And that, of course, is rooted in my own son's inability to access the school system. So, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer, Adrienne. Similarly, I have only recently considered myself part of a disability community due to chronic illness that has developed later in my life. And so, yeah, I think as I reflect on this question about ableism, yeah, and through my work here at Benefits Law Center, I have come to understand that ableism affects all of us who are living in this society, and obviously to different degrees for those that are, dealing with disabilities themselves. But my experience here working with the Social Security system and understanding disability and retirement benefits as you age and go through your life, your disabilities change and you become disabled sometimes later in life. So my experience with this has been through a set of family members who worked for many years of their life in some hard labor jobs, and then eventually they're have developed disabilities later in life and go through that experience of not being able to find work, not getting accommodations to do things with their family, not having access to economic stability because of the nature of their bodies. And so, yeah, that's where I come to this from. That is why I came into this work working with disability benefits in particular. And so when I answer a lot of these questions, I'm really speaking a lot from my clients' perspectives, their experience of the legal system of Social Security, what they experience on a daily basis at their jobs. And so I'll be speaking from that side. But yeah, I want to support what Adrienne had to say about it's impactful across lots of spectrums, work, economic abilities, and has more recently impacted my own life that I am learning as I go. So.
Okay, next slide, please. Question number 2. How did your involvement with the legal system begin?
Okay, so I first became involved with the legal system as a legal aid client when I was in college after experiencing sex discrimination. I was very grateful to get a free attorney to represent me in an administrative matter to hold my college accountable. And that was something that was incredibly transformative for my life. I did not know I had autism at that point, and yet my attorneys were incredibly inclusive and willing to work with me, even when I had some symptoms or traits present more strongly. They were equipped and affirming in providing me legal services. I was very just again grateful and saw how attorneys can really help folks who have even less privilege than I did. And so I have decided to dedicate my career to the practice of civil legal aid, which is providing low-income people with free legal services in the civil area of law. So again, I'm very grateful and drawn to this work because I've had my own experiences with the legal system, and I know again how much attorneys and legal services can really encourage and allow folks with disabilities to achieve their goals. Thank you.
My involvement with the legal system began with housing. I've lived in 5 different apartments the last 2.5 years, and I've never once paid to break my lease because I've always had to invoke some sort of legal something. I've worked with, I have a housing program called Housing Essential Needs. HEN, they have a legal team. They've been quite helpful. And I worked with the tenants union, and you can call 211 and get lawyer numbers and assistance that way. And I've even contacted the King County Bar Association directly to get a normal rate lawyer in the past. And they also offer pro bono services, and they take months to get through the wait list, but they're super helpful if you have that long to wait. Yeah, my involvement's been mostly housing.
This is Adrienne, and I honestly didn't pay much attention. I grew up very poor and didn't really understand how the legal system operated or how it worked or anything. I was the first person in my family to go to college. And so when I came out of college, my first job was as a community organizer for Planned Parenthood over in Eastern Washington. And one of the things that we did was went to one of the conferences they took me to was in Washington, DC, in January of 2006, I believe. And we did not know this was going to happen, but at that time, Sandra Day O'Connor announced her retirement. And given the political landscape at that time, we were just completely deflated and crushed because we knew that she would be replaced by a person who didn't uphold the same values that she did. And that was honestly my first time I thought about the legal system and just wondered how it could be a tool to make people's lives better. So that's how my initial involvement with the legal system began.
This is Alex again. Yeah, I would say my involvement with the legal system is when I was younger, was experiencing. I had 2 uncles that went through the disability process through Social Security and had to go wait a couple of years and go through the long wait of getting to a hearing in front of a judge where they advocated for their disability benefits that were owed to them. Just following that along got me interested in this work. And then I have a social work background. And so just encountering all of the various legal issues that my clients have experienced over 8 or 9 years of being in working with low income and homeless folks, and understanding that really whether you want to or not, if you are a poor or living in poverty, that you will interact with the legal system just because the criminalization of being in poverty and this is the society's ableist tendencies. And so just experiencing that, working with our clients, and then I came here explicitly to work on benefits claims for people because I believe that these are legal processes as much as they, for instance, our clients are working with Social Security about Social Security benefits, and Social Security attempts to, not make this a legal process as much as possible, despite that is exactly what's happening. And so, so my involvement has been is now with administrative law hearings, working with benefits claims, overpayments, terminations of benefits. Those are all legal processes that limit our clients' ability to to work to receive the economic justice that they deserve. And so that's my involvement now, is strictly with benefits claims.
All right. Question number 3. What accommodations did you, your clients, or your colleagues ask for, and were those accommodations granted?
Yeah, so I, as an attorney, for every hearing I appear in, I request accommodations to the King County Superior Court as well as the District Court. And I request some extra time to be able to answer questions so that I can process the question and be able to respond appropriately. I also have an accommodation to use a sensory device, or some folks call them like a fidget toy, while I am in a hearing, because there are so many sensory inputs in a courtroom with a lot of noise, really bright lights. It's really helpful for me to have something to let out that energy. I also am able to sit in the lobby because I am practicing on calendars where there are a lot of cases being called. So if I'm in person, I can sit outside in the lobby to wait for my case to be called, where I'm representing the client. And these are all just different accommodations that I, again, request as an attorney, not for my client, as part of attending hearings in the cases I appear in.
So as far as accommodations that I've made, so my stuff's mostly housing. So I've made like official ADA compliance demand letters. And usually what I get from those is an entire disregard to, they just ignore any request and just kind of answer whatever they want to. Most recently, my apartment manager responded with entire disregard to my formal demand letter, stating that if I don't like my home, then I can pay 3 times my rent to break my lease. And I'd like to note that the amount that she wanted to break my lease was more money than I'm allowed to have on hand at one point, and still receive SSI benefits. And I've asked for things like, I can't stand in showers, so I've asked for like a handle and stuff, and they just disregard you.
I haven't seen too many requests for accommodations in court yet. I infer, although I can't be sure, that a lot of that has to do with the fact that people don't know that they can or should ask for accommodations. I think it's better in King County, but in other counties, I'm worried that the accommodations are behind a lot of barriers. And there's still a lot of novelty when it comes to accommodations. Some of the things, like what Olivia was mentioning, they shouldn't even need to be accommodation requests. In my view, those should just be perfectly acceptable ways that humans can show up, and that we just grant those as a matter of course. And we expand our understanding of how humans operate, and we expand our understanding of our collective needs. I tell this, so that's the first part of my question. The second part I'll say is, I have seen some pretty egregious accommodation communication needs go unmet. So for example, I have witnessed a court hearing where a deaf adult child was being granted guardianship to his non-deaf parents. And there weren't any ASL interpreters on hand. I'm sorry for the ASL interpreters that are doing this now, because that must, it's heartbreaking. And so there weren't any ASL interpreters for whatever reason. They didn't get scheduled. And, you know, the judge went through with it anyway and granted the guardianship to the parents. And really, from what I could tell, nobody could be sure, you know, what the deaf person was thinking or feeling. If you know about disability justice principles, you know, I mean, you have to center the person with a disability and make sure that that person, you know, can communicate appropriately. And but also I think it's important and really critical, and I say this as a parent to disabled child myself, that people with disability, their parents aren't always in the best position to be guardians. A lot of times guardianships strip autonomy from people when, you know, supported decision-making would be a better avenue to retain as much autonomy for folks as possible. So, that's the two part to my answer. First of all, I think accommodations are still novel and unknown. There's not a billboard or anything, you know, when you walk into the courts, hey, if you need accommodations or if you need to access your hearing today, if you need help accessing your hearing today, you know, walk in and come see this person. There isn't that yet. But also I think that understanding the how precarious it can be for a person with a disability to come into court and to give away a lot of their autonomy. I feel like there needs to be more of an appreciation of what's actually happening there. Thanks.
Yeah. So what I would speak about, the accommodations that we ask for our clients are extensive. Every client that we work with is experiencing disabilities and needs accommodations. And so depending on what our clients' needs are, we have asked for ASL interpreters that at hearings that are hit or miss at this point. And so standard practice from at least Benefits Law Center here is that we try to get our own accommodations for our clients before having said hearing or going to the field office to meet with Social Security agents, because our experience and our clients' experiences have been that despite the request for accommodations, they aren't always honored. And then because the nature of the work that we do, which is helping people get the benefits that are owed to them, the real pressure when you don't follow through on accommodation request is whether this person will get the benefits that they need to survive or not. And so the question becomes, do we proceed without the accommodations, as many of our clients feel forced to do because Social Security doesn't recognize their accommodation request? And so many times our clients are forced to make that decision about the accommodation needs that they have and their benefits needs that they're trying to resolve in order to live. And so we have asked for them, and sometimes they are granted and sometimes they're not. It just sort of depends on, honestly, the administrative abilities of the Social Security office we're working with, or the hearings office. The hearings office is usually much more responsive for accommodations than the field offices themselves, but it is a hit or miss. And so from our perspective, we work to bring those accommodations with us so that we don't have to experience that, rock and a hard place of, do I get the accommodations that my client needs, or do we work on the benefits claims that they're at risk of losing possibly? The other thing I wanted to highlight is that many of these places are, especially federal buildings, offices for federal, are ADA compliant or claim to be. But if you attend a field office that is small and has, you know, seating for 10, and you're the 11th, 12th, 13th person there, and you need accommodations, you cannot stand for long periods of time. How do you get your accommodations requested when you're trying to resolve your benefits issues? And so, as I think Adrienne mentioned, there's some things that are just the way we live, you know, that are needed for accommodations for people with disabilities, but also for anybody to go to the field office and have to stand for a few hours in order to meet with the Social Security representative. Those might be claimed as accommodations, but they're really just so that we can function as a society and a community supporting the needs of people. And so, you know, those accommodation requests not being met for individuals with disabilities are also accommodations that are not being met for people who don't have disabilities. And so, yeah, I just wanted to highlight that fact and what I experience from our clients a lot of times, that choice that they have to make about whether to proceed without the accommodations or not, because the agency itself is not providing the accommodations in a timely manner.
Okay, next slide, please. Question number 4. How did accommodations or lack thereof impact the verdicts of the cases that you, your clients, or your colleagues worked on?
Yeah, accommodations are truly critical to handling a case where any person in that case, whether it be the litigant, the client, or the attorney, has a disability. And so these really can make or break the case, which is why it's important for me to request the accommodations that I need for every hearing that I appear in. I think Adrienne is absolutely right in her comment regarding that we need to have accessibility built into our legal practices and into our courtrooms to reduce the burdens on disabled people and people with disabilities for existing as themselves. You know, I think currently, especially as a Latina practicing law, I really need to make sure I get my accommodations, because as soon as the judicial officer sees my last name, they have all sorts of preconceptions of me. I have even gone to hearings where the judicial officer whom I appeared before doesn't recognize me and demands to know what I am doing there, because I guess I don't look the part of an attorney. So I always make sure to have accommodations for myself, given the racism and ableism that our legal system has intertwined with it. But again, I believe that we can have a better future. And I think that starts with educating our judicial officers and law students and attorneys about accommodations. I also want to agree with Adrienne's comment that accommodations in these processes are very little known, but they should be integral to our practice. These are things that we should be learning as we're growing up. Attorneys should be learning in law school. Judges should be having regular training on, as well as court staff, so that we can, again, build accessibility into our practice to reduce that burden on disabled people.
My involvement with the legal system has not made it to court. I've actually been advised against going to court with housing issues by the many attorneys I've talked to, because there isn't a monetary gain available, and I would just be wasting money, is what they've told me. And it would be hard to get a lawyer to actually stand up for that kind of case in court. So I've mostly made demand letters, and I've worked with corporate lawyers and things like that, and just hash things out more civilly and written matter.
I think I touched on this a moment ago in my previous answer about the deaf person being, his parents being granted guardianship without an ASL interpreter. I guess I will just touch on briefly again the language access and the language barriers that people experience, which shouldn't, in my view, fall under the umbrella of accommodations or official accommodations that somebody has to request in order to just access the basic court hearing. The other day I heard an attorney refer to a person as an ESL person. And I've continued to be confused as how you can be an ESL person. And the attorney was trying to say that the person might have limited English proficiency, in which case the whole hearing should have stopped and we should have figured out what language that person feels best communicating in and gotten an interpreter, but that didn't happen. And I frequently see ASL interpreters coming on. There's only one interpreter, and there really needs to be two, as these two ASL interpreters, I'm sure, can attest. They have to go back and forth. You know, they need breaks. There's also some, you know, making sure that they are communicating actually what is being said. And so there's lots of reasons that there needs to be not just one ASL interpreter, but two. And so these issues don't fall under accommodations in my view, but I did want to highlight them all the same.
Yeah, I would say the lack of accommodations has negatively impacted our clients almost every time that it has happened. Social Security asks for, they're asking you direct questions about your financial situation, about where you're living, what the living situation is like. And without the accommodations, in particular for deaf and hard of hearing clients that we work with, they get wrong answers regularly and proceed to terminate card charge overpayments to clients without getting the necessary ASL interpreters to work on their claims. We have a handful of cases here that we are working directly with clients who need ASL interpreters, and their cases and benefits have been stopped or terminated because of the direct impact of non-accommodations. And so for our work here at Benefits Law Center, we end up taking a lot of claims and cases that have resulted in issues for our clients as benefits that are owed to them directly because of the accommodations that have been lacking from the Social Security offices, an agency that claims to work with people for people with disabilities. You know, and I respect the hard nature of their job, but when that's the case, and then a client's benefits are cut off and their access to housing is eliminated, or they can't eat that month, then that's a direct result because of the accommodations that they don't provide to our clients. And so we have an outsized amount of our clients that we're working with are just because we don't trust that Social Security will provide the accommodations necessary for these clients to get the benefits that are owed to them. They're eligible, they are in good standing, and because of Social Security's inability to provide accommodations, they now have a legal issue that they would not have had they been provided the accommodations.
Okay, next slide, please. Question number 5. What can both the legal system and the disability community and allies learn from your experience?
Yeah, again, I think it's really important for institutions and folks working within them, whether they be allies, disabled, for them to build in accessibility into those institutions. In addition, I think it's really important for our disability community to spotlight and be more inclusive towards folks with other diverse experiences and marginalizations, so that we can accurately represent our community, which has people from all different walks of life and different lived experiences. By elevating the most marginalized voices and using our privilege to work in community and work alongside those folks, we will become closer to achieving equity for all of us. So I think, again, really just focusing on those most marginalized communities and really uplifting diverse experiences, as well as building in accessibility into our systems.
All right, so back to housing. Our legal system, it's set up in a hurry up to wait format. It's very fast paced. You often have deadlines that are maybe 48 hours. Then you're penalized for not meeting them on time, and sometimes your whole demand just gets dropped or ignored because you didn't meet the legal deadline. And then that's often followed by a long wait period. And then as soon as that wait is over, it's time to react again, and quickly. And as I stated earlier in my introductions, I need extra time, and I'm not always functional in specific ways, and I don't know ahead of time. I don't know until I wake up that day. And I think that we need a more streamlined process and less time-sensitive process for the delivery and resolution of legal demands.
I'll echo what the two previous speakers said, especially Olivia's answer. My answer may just unpack her answer a little bit more. But thinking about the question, and when I was telling people that I was participating in this panel, I actually had multiple attorneys, 2 attorneys of color in particular, say to me, "Oh, I have a disability, but I don't tell anybody." So I think part of the revolution needs to be talking about disabilities more, talking about our own disabilities and talking about our own support needs, and just really shedding light on how pervasive it is. It's estimated about 20% of people have a disability. And so it's not a few folks, it's the largest minority group as far as I know. So I think the legal system that is striving to be more representative of the people that it serves could do 2 things. We could use more plain language, as others have talked about. We have our own jargon in this field that feels designed to keep people from effectively participating in their cases. And I don't know that it needs to be that way. I think I actually left the field. I practiced for a few years before I had kids back in 2015, and just seeing there is a huge difference in 10 years coming back into the legal field now and seeing how responsive, at least in King County, the judges are trying to be compared to back 10 years ago. I do see great strides and changes being made, but I also still see a ton of work to be done in terms of judges taking the time to explain to people before them what these proceedings mean, and trying to use more plain language in the court. So I just want to appreciate the work that's being done. I also want to give a shout out to the Supreme Court's Disability Justice Task Force. Justice Whitener and Judge Wedby and Jocelyn Nelson. Great work on getting that task force up and going. It's so needed and very timely. And they also focus on a lot of the issues that we have been talking today, including plain language. But and then systemically, I do think that we could be more humble and just making the findings and the rulings that are coming from the bench, and even the communication and the services that are being proposed, that people are actually being ordered to go through, being mindful of the actual on the ground barriers that are being that are inherent in some of these things. So and again, I think great strides are being made, but you know, when you order somebody to go do a service, you know, they've got to find transportation, they've got to have money to do that. There has to be a cell phone, there's got to be internet, there's got to be, you know, communication barrier free, that is barrier free. And there's just a ton of work that goes into some of these services and such that get ordered by the court, or and so I think that there's still a lot of work to be done to understand what those services are, and then to understand all of the barriers that somebody is being asked to overcome in order to comply with court orders. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just echo what Elicia said about the speed at which the legal system operates at, and the lack of ability to sort of change that speed. It is, you know, one set of speed, and then you know, if you can't get along in that, then you are kind of left behind. And so I would say that that's, you know, disability justice requires planning, forethought, administrative abilities to set up accommodations, to allow access in a variety of ways. And if the speed of these proceedings are such that, you know, you're scheduling things day of, day before of course things are going to go wrong that will result in the lack of accommodations for people with disabilities. And so, you know, it's very interesting from my position as a support staff and administrative support staff here for attorneys that work here. I do a lot of these accommodations for our clients to meet with the attorneys that work here. And so in the same way that, you know, Social Security or judges have to do some of that work ahead of time for hearings that they have with people, I kind of understand what it's like to have to schedule in the you know, relying on an interpreter that's going to be available. And sometimes that doesn't go right. You're trying to coordinate 4 or 5 people at a time. And so that speed really stops your ability to do some of these things appropriately that provides disability justice to people. And so, that's, so I really just want to echo what Elicia said about the speed of the court system and the legal system and the processes that happen. And you need all of that time in order to really allow people to access the system the way that they need to for their own well-being. And so, and then I think just the other thing that really could learn from our clients' experiences is that our clients are they're experts in their own experiences ultimately, and how that they're treated. And I think a lot of, at least in our work here, a lot of accommodation requests and disability in general are questioned about, is that needed or not? More judges and attorneys who spend time with people who have disabilities and accommodation requests so that they can understand what it's like to experience this process without those things, and understand why it's so valuable that they provide these accommodations, both with their own work with their clients, but also in these spaces. It's really that's what I hope to see that people understand, is that you know, to understand and allow people to you know, have their lived experience is what is supported in this process.
Okay, next slide, please.
Colin, this is Kimberly. There is a question in the Q&A if you'd like
All
to
right.
read it and then invite the panelists to answer.
All right, then. So there is as Kimberly said, there is a question in the Q&A, and it states, and I quote, "In my family, there have been things that have developed that I'm unsure if they are considered a disability, and I don't know what things I can ask for. For example, ADHD. It's not clear to me, based on what I've read, if that's legally considered a disability, so I don't know if I can ask for an accommodation. I'm also hard of hearing and wear hearing aids, but I'm not sure if I can ask for accommodations since I have them. Any insight?" End quote. Elicia.
So my last job was actually inside of the SSA, the Social Security Administration, and that is totally something that you can get considered a disability. If you're chronically late, or if you don't make things on time, and just that sort of thing, it's generally, at least, it's been, I don't know, 5 or 10 years since I worked, but back then, if you were late or missed work more than 10% of the time, that was considered unemployable by Social Security standards for most ALJs, attorney law judges. So basically, I mean, just about anything can be considered a disability in terms of, do you need accommodations? And absolutely, you can ask for accommodations. If it's something you need to be able to perform tasks or work or anything better, then yeah, you can ask for it. It's our society isn't very good at accepting those sorts of things yet, but they are getting better.
Does anyone else want to answer the question from the Q&A?
Yeah, I love this question. It's such an important question. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. Anytime I have the opportunity to give input on how to do accommodations, one of the first things I always check for is what is being required of the person to ask for an accommodation. And so anytime there's medical documentation or proof of a diagnosis, I always urge that isn't built into the accommodation requirements at all. There's too many hurdles and too many barriers to accessing the medical field in general, any medical provider. That doesn't need to be explained. But also, when we look at the disproportionality of people who get diagnoses, especially in children early on, Black children tend to not get diagnoses until much later as compared to white children for a variety of reasons, systemic racism chief among them. And also, the the characterization of especially kids of color who struggle and have distress, a lot of times it gets written off as behavioral issues or behavioral challenges. And there isn't really a lot of curiosity about being able to regulate your body, and that stemming from a disability. So I agree with what Elicia said, in that yeah, if you've focusing on the support need, there really needs to be a focus on the support need rather than the actual diagnosis, especially in the autism community. A lot of times you'll see ADHD and autism co-occurring, and there's a lot of late diagnosed, misdiagnosed, undiagnosed, or self-diagnosed folks in the autism community for a variety of reasons. Olivia mentioned briefly masking. I definitely identify with that and echo what she said about, needing to suppress a large portion of your identity and your anxiety or whatever it is, and just to get through the day. And that's very exhausting. And so a lot of times, because of that masking, women especially are misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all. So I do think that there really needs to be a focus on the person's stated support needs, and we need to believe them. A lot of times these accommodation requests cost us nothing. It costs the judge nothing. It costs the courtroom nothing to give, a few extra minutes for a person to respond to questions that are really impactful in their lives.
I also just wanted to provide some additional insight to the answer to the recent question. I really identify with not necessarily knowing what to ask, especially as somebody who's a pretty new litigator. And when I was talking with my doctor about it, she also wasn't really familiar with how to prescribe accommodations for court or what it might require. So I had to really do just some internal thinking, similar to what Adrienne and Elicia were talking about, to see what I really needed, where the pain points were for me in court, and what I was afraid might happen. For instance, a judge, me making a comment that would not be appropriate for court because I'm rushed in answering a question or responding to a comment. So asking for extra time and being able to have my sensory input there, because I had a fear that the judicial officer might say, like, what are you doing with this device while you're supposed to be arguing counsel? So I tried to just, again, identify based on my experiences what might happen and what I was concerned about, and really, try to adapt as I get more experience to seeing what I need and working with my doctor. I think just really important to take inventory of that. I also did want to note that my family was pretty similar in that I have a lot of folks in my family who have autistic traits and other neurodivergent traits, and so that it can make diagnosis a lot harder because our behaviors are normal, quote unquote, in our families. And so they don't think necessarily that we might need assistance because we're already being accommodated in our family home, because it's our family culture to accommodate us. And it's our family culture to engage in certain behaviors that others may perceive as unique to disability. So I just wanted to provide that additional information in response to that question. Thank you.
Yeah, I just have a small thing to add. I would echo everything that has been said already by the panel. My thoughts about accommodations are, if you feel comfy to ask for them, then you should. And you know, the worst thing they can do is say no to you ultimately. But if you get a yes and some accommodations requested for you, then, you know, that's obviously the best outcome. And so if you feel comfortable disclosing that, and my hope, at least for me as a paralegal here working with clients, is that I hope I am open enough to hear out people's accommodation requests. And it's part of our intake process is asking people what they might need support with or help with, or if there's anything that they need accommodation wise. And so, yeah, from my stance, and I work with our clients to help them craft ideas or ways that they will bring it up to, for instance, Social Security workers when they're talked to them about how to ask for the accommodations that they need. And so, yeah, from my perspective, if you feel comfy, you should ask for it and see what they say.
All right, so I realize there's one unanswered question so far in the Q&A tab, and I'm going to read that question out. It is, and I quote, I work for the state. We do not have a policy on how to request reasonable accommodation. I applied and was told it would not be considered due to my doctor not using our agency's form. I know of others in my org who did not have their accommodation granted without using the agency's form. I have now given over my private medical data and I am still waiting for a meeting with HR. I began this process in early January. My question is twofold. One, what timeline should my agency follow? Two, can they deny me but not another due to the incorrect form submitted? End quote.
Colin, this is Kimberly. I believe this is more of a question along the lines of reasonable accommodation within an employer rather than within the legal system. And I would actually encourage the commenter to check with the organization's HR policies. They should have their reasonable accommodation process listed within their policies. And if they can't find any information, I highly suggest that they find their ADA coordinator, whoever is assigned to their department, in order to have a conversation with them to best get the answers that would apply to their workplace. I'll post it in the Q&A, but there is some information from the ADA National Network on reasonable accommodations in the workplace as well.
Thank you for reminding me, Kimberly. That's greatly appreciated. All right, so we're going to move on to the backup questions that I have. To a backup question that I have, which is, how do you think things can be different if there are lawyers and judges who specifically work with people who need different types of access needs, such as ASL or CART?
Yeah, I think it could really transform our legal system if we have more attorneys, judicial officers, court staff who have disabilities. I know there are several currently in our legal system doing great work. We also have the Washington Attorneys with Disabilities Association. It is a group through our licensing body, the Washington State Bar. That is an affinity group where we can connect with other attorneys who have disabilities. And I've personally found that a really great experience. It's one of the few disability bars, so they call it, within the country. And it's just a really great space for us to talk about issues we're experiencing and we're seeing as attorneys who are disabled. I did also want to note that I think it's really important for attorneys and judicial officers and court staff with disabilities and without disabilities to again center and be dedicated to the most marginalized folks for whom the system is largely inaccessible. I know, again, I have a lot of privilege and I try to be mindful of that as I advocate for low-income folks who've been surviving domestic violence and are disabled. And so really keeping that in mind that although we may experience issues as judicial officers, attorneys, and court staff, the ableism of the legal system most directly impacts those who are unable to access it due to lack of access, financially, disability, or language access. So those are some of my thoughts on the question.
Well, I think that, well, for one, that's a great idea, especially because I think someone said earlier that 20% of the population had some form of disability. So having a court system that could accommodate that, and lawyers that are just, used to making accommodations, and a lot of times people don't believe you or they fight you on your accommodations, and it's exhausting, and it would be really nice to not have to challenge that.
When I started trying to be really mindful in my practice of anti-racism and anti-ableism work, and it is a practice. I don't think I'll ever arrive at being an anti-racist or an anti-ableist person. It is really something that I have to be mindful and of every day. But I think this work really is about making the currently invisible visible, and asking for the folks involved who in the administration and the judicial administration of our and in our court system, asking them to be more mindful and do more planning to accommodate everyone, all people, anticipate all people's communication needs and their all manner of just being human, existing. I think asking for that, just even asking for that still feels daunting. Just in, cordial, friendly conversations I've had with folks, it still comes across as a burden. And in doing social justice work myself, for several decades now, I often hear people say, I just want to be believed. Right? I'm sure Olivia, hears that, with domestic violence survivors and lots of my friends of color who have graciously educated me over the years. That's the number one thing. And I think that somebody said that earlier, just being believed that you have this struggle and that you have this support need, I think would go a long way to creating a legal system that is more responsive and that works for everyone.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what is said. I think one thing that I think about as doing this work now for 5 or 6 years is the experience of anti-ableism work is a practice, and it you build a way of working with people that allows access needs to be respected and to be honored and to be made sure is executed on, accommodations as well. And whether that's you learning it because you're working with people or because the system has more people who are experiencing this themselves, disability themselves, and so they can speak directly to that. Either way, it would revolutionize the legal system in a way that is slowly being transformed over time into a way that could be radically changed to allow all sorts of needs. And I just want to highlight this again as somebody who doesn't experience disability on a daily basis, that all of these changes that allow greater access are also changes that are supportive for people who don't have disabilities but need access too. And these are all, you know, allowing everybody to access the system only increases your own ability, even if you're not at the marginalized community, to access the system as well. And it allows you some flexibility and freedom in the way that you access the legal system that is not able to right now. We all have to access it in this very specific certain way. And, you know, allowing accommodation requests and you know, entry points into the system that are accessible to people at all kinds of needs would support everybody's ability to you know, be justice involved. And so if it's lawyers and judges who are working with these and that's the experience they need to understand disability justice, so be it. I would hope that it's a twofold, like there are more people who have these lived experiences in the courtrooms and in the offices, but also, you know, understanding that this is supportive for everybody's needs ultimately.
Okay, next slide, please. So now we are going to move on to our comprehension and feedback survey. So this question will ask you a comprehension question based on what you have learned from this event. It will also allow you to rate us and give feedback, and it even has some suggestions as to what future Understanding Ableism topic could be. And Kimberly, are you going to post the link in the chat? Yeah, and as you can see on the slide, there's also a QR code, so you can scan it and take the survey. Please take the survey. I'd really appreciate some feedback on how I can do Understanding Ableism webinars better.
Just a reminder, if you don't get it from the QR code, you can click on the link in chat. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. As a reminder, excuse me, this event was recorded and you can view the video later at Disability Empowerment Center's YouTube channel. Our next webinar will be in April and it will be about the disability community's housing experiences. It will take place on Tuesday, April 15th. Thanks again and have a great rest of your day.